Hello, everyone. This is Kellie Fitzgerald. Intuitive Medium Kellie Fitzgerald is my website. I have an amazing guest today, so we're going to get right into it. Um, what do you prefer to be called? Because you are a doctor, you are a PhD. What is your preference?
Well, I have a joke that I tell. It's because you and I have connected quite a bit. And I'm sort of casual about most everything,
Mhm.
even though we're both into deep, serious healing work. I like to, we like to fool around just to keep it lively. But one of the things I say is I work my ass off to get that degree.
Yes.
Call me doctor once, and then stop calling me that.
Okay. All right.
But actually, Bob is good.
Okay. And when I set up the show, I called you Dr. Bob. So that's kind of, you know,
There you go.
that's the way I put it. We do very similar work, although you have more of an education and you come from it from that way. Where I'm coming at it from, look, this is what I've been through. This is how I got through it. And this is how I can help you. So I
Yeah.
want to talk about your work, and you have a couple of things online that are very interesting. So let's talk about that. What led you to working with trauma and healing first off?
Well, first, let me respond to the. I've read your content. I know what you're up to. The idea that I have more degrees and licenses. A lot of times we do a space on Wednesdays on the. I call it the twit. I guess it's the twit. I guess it's the X, whatever you want to
Right,
call it.
right.
It's an amazing amount of healing that can happen on that platform that I had no clue. I thought it was for sure the most superficial platform on the planet. And actually, there are a lot of us in there, a lot of us on the path, those of us that are committed to being vulnerable and open and healing. But one of the things when often a therapist comes into our space and says, "Oh, yeah, I'm a therapist. I have this license. I have the," and then I usually interrupt them and say, "Okay, we won't hold that against you."
Right.
Because, and it's a joke, but it's not really a joke because uh, the training for a therapist, at least in the United States, is mostly intellectual and with a heavy emphasis on the cognitive and the behavioral, right? Very little education on the importance of psychodynamics, which is looking at the unconscious, that giant ocean of truth that's running the whole show. So very few therapists are getting training in the educational world and getting licensed behind that education for healing.
Right.
We're not pumping out healers. We're pumping out intellectual
Right.
people who understand the research, I suppose. But so for me, most of my healing, I came in behind a suicidal end of a relationship, and I was drinking and drugging and everything you can think of to try to kill the old pain and then the subsequent pain, also known as complex trauma, right?
Yep.
We get wounded when we're little in different ways. Some of us are from good families. I'm from a good family, but that means nothing. It was a shit show. It was actually a pretty significant shit show. And we take that stuff in the body and then we carry it on, right? And then we stack more on top of it. I know you know exactly what I'm talking and then the trauma that we stack on top of the original trauma sometimes is worse than the original, which is my case.
Right.
So I came out of that just wanting to die. And fortunately, it was during the men's movement, and I got a lot of support and started 12-step recovery. And of course, a lot of people, when they're new in the work, they say, "Well, let me help others. I want to help everybody." So I got a degree in clinical psychology, and then a little later, I got a PhD in that, mostly about helping organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the short version of. Well, actually, it wasn't very short, but that was a version of my how I got into all this.
That's I've talked to a lot of people through the years. I'm just getting back into doing podcasting again. But in all those years, it's amazing to me how many similarities there are in people's stories and how often I will hear someone tell me, I think remembering the trauma was the worst part. I think that was, it was the stuff that you do after you've already been traumatized. That was the worst part. And I know that's especially true, seems to be, with people who have undergone some kind of domestic violence kind of story. Um, what would you tell someone who was at the point you were at when you were like, life is not worth living, I'm just going to give it? And I've been there too. And I'm really curious to know what would you tell someone who's there right now?
Well, there's a couple of angles to come at that. If I supervise a lot of therapists, not so many now, but over the years, and I have a kind of a rule about that. If I'm working with a client and they're threatening suicide, refer them to someone,
Somebody
get
else.
them another level of care. We call
Right.
it a higher level of care. Lock them up until that passes, and then let's work on the trauma. I don't know why that just moved me. I wanted to cry because I've been there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It seems like the only solution when you're in that much pain. It's and there's some sense, it's sensible in some ways. It's like, if I got to live with this kind of pain, let me out of here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I'm
So,
done.
and we're in that place. We don't think when we're in that place, we don't think that there's any other way.
Right.
You got to lock me up. First of all, lock them up. and then help them and love them toward the old wound, to feel that stuff and offload it. And then you can almost hear the music in the background. Oh, there's an opening that happens, but we can't see it when we're in there. So I would say, get in a lot of support. And when we're in that place, we don't want support.
No.
We want to hide out and be in it and hold on to my misery.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I had just enough wanting to live to crawl my way into 12-step recovery. And from there, I found therapy and healing. And I don't know if that really answers the question. It's a tough one when somebody's in that place. Love them. That's all I can say. Just put some love on them.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people don't realize how much they need to share what they're going through.
Yes.
Sometimes they will just shut down because, oh, nobody cares. Nobody wants to hear it. When in fact, there are people who do care.
That is right. There's nothing there. You can tell me, man, bring your pain. Tell me, because there's nothing more interesting than somebody's story, right?
Yeah.
It's great theater. I'm a psychodrama guy. Have you stumbled into psychodrama, Kelly? Yeah, where we take our stories from our life and we put it on the stage.
Right.
And that's, to me, it's been the most healing of all of the different methods that I've used for healing trauma, is to not only tell the story, but put the story on its feet and let the feet, because we have to, like you were just saying, we have to have somebody that hears us. So that it's one thing, it's getting healed, the part of us that wasn't heard when we were little, right? And it's not always because we had these horrific caregivers. A lot of times it was just they were in their own shit, right? Or they were busy or whatever, but we didn't get heard, right? Our pain did not get heard. So now, as an adult, if we get in a group where people can still their nervous systems enough to be able to just hear my pain, that is healing in itself. Now, if that person then shares something from their life, then I can see myself in them and I can take it to another level. See, these are the things that we don't think about when we're isolated and hurting. And we have to for me, I'm from a long line of tough guys. I had to be dragged into a circle of a men's group. And then I was an idiot for quite a while until finally I let the tears come and they said, "Thank you, Bob. You got any anger in there?" "Yes, I got some." And they said, "Thank you, Bob." Exactly opposite of what I thought, right? I thought I had to hold all that inside.
Yeah. Do you find that it is tougher for men in general to heal from trauma or to even talk about it? Because I think men are kind of programmed to be that tough guy.
Well, there's a myth around that somehow men are, I think it's a myth. I think it's a little bit overemphasized. I'll just say that because it doesn't take much. If you get a man in a circle of men who are being vulnerable, boom, almost, I mean, it's amazing. And I've worked with men and women for many decades here. And I think sometimes women have gotten a little bit more permission to let a tear out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But I'll also tell you, women are quick to wipe that tear away, baby.
Yep.
Because I think a lot of women have gotten to look good, be pretty, be nice, don't stir up anything for the world. Whereas men have been told, be tough, fix stuff, figure it out. We've both got equal amounts of wounds
Yes.
and cultural piling on about being different than what we actually are. You know, women can access the tears, but sometimes they have more trouble going deep with it, and being able to be self-empowered, right? Whereas men tend to, once they get in there, oh man, we're a big bucket of tears. We're all just weeping and holding each other, and you know, the women's movement said, "All right, we're not taking this anymore." And then the men's movement said, "Uh-oh, I guess we better go in."
Yeah.
I guess we better start looking in here.
Yeah.
That's kind of the path I've been on lately. But I don't know. I don't think men are. I think it might be slightly harder for men to get in there.
Right.
But once men are in there, men are extremely skilled at emotions. I'm just gonna flip that whole bias that people have towards men not being very good at feelings.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the majority of men are, like you say, they're very capable. There are some that have been shut down though, and that's kind of, well, there's women that have been shut down too. So
Yes.
what do we do with them? If you see someone and they're just, you can see it, and they're just shut down. Is there any
Well,
way
life
to reach them?
well, you can send them to a good healer like you
Well, thank you.
or me,
Mhm.
or a 12-step program. There's, even if they're not using, there's good 12-step programs, adult children of dysfunctional families and
Yes.
Independence Anonymous. There's plenty of places to send them if they're ready.
Right.
However, if they're not ready and they don't want to, life will, they, you know, Dr. Carl Jung said, anything that's unresolved within us will show up outside of us as fate.
Yes.
We'll call it fate. We'll say, oh, that just happened to me.
Right.
These things are just happening to me. And that doesn't have anything to do with me. Yeah, right. We're creating it, right? And so eventually life will slap them into some kind of a reality or not. A lot of people make it through their whole life without looking within for 1 second.
Yeah, it's true. That is true. Yeah.
It's not required.
It isn't, but you would think, at least I would think people would want to, find out what makes themselves tick, find out, why do you react that way to certain situations? But you're right, people don't always do that.
Well, it takes us to the vulnerable topic, doesn't it? Because Brene Brown brought it to the world in a bigger way. But we've been on this for a long time. But she's brought it into the world in a way that's caught fire, man. People understand this vulnerability topic, and there's nothing more courageous than being vulnerable. It's exactly the opposite of what I was told. I was told that that's for wimps.
Right.
But you don't have to think about it too long to realize that there's nothing scarier than being emotionally open.
Yep.
Because it is. I did a doctoral research, a whole study on leaders who are emotionally open, and they all agreed it's dangerous. People will use it against you.
Oh, they will.
Yeah, and you know about that. And it's
Yeah,
because we're both kind of public figures, and we've been vulnerable in public, and people have done things to try to take us down. That's part of the game.
Yeah.
However, it is also the biggest. They all agreed. All the leaders that I interviewed agreed that it is the best way to inspire followers. If that's what you're up to, if you got something golden that you're doing in the world and you want people to join, you got to show your humanity.
You have to, absolutely. That's one of the things that I've done because I have a deaf grandson, is written a series of children's books. And at first, the whole family was like, "Oh, don't talk about that in public. Don't talk about that. Why are you hiding him?" And now he finds it wonderful. But every piece that you share about yourself is going to invite some hater somewhere to reach out and try to put you down. I know you've dealt with that. I deal with that on a weekly basis, if not daily, some weeks. I don't know what makes people want to do that, but but they do, and there's always someone. So how do you deal with that? What do you think makes people just reach out to try to bash somebody?
Well, that's a whole podcast right there,
Yeah,
man.
it is.
That one. I'll start by saying, for some reason, Kelly, I don't have that much of it happening anymore. I don't know what's happening. There's something about my algorithm in my life and my algorithm on social media that's not inviting it as much as it used to. I don't know. It's a bit of a mystery. But I'll quote a very controversial guy, Jordan Peterson. Have you stumbled into that guy? Yeah, and everybody rolls their eyes, because I don't care who you are. There is a little component of what he says that, wow, that's pretty sharp.
Yeah.
But then there's this whole other bunch of shit that he says are you kidding me? So there's no way to quote the guy without saying, well, I don't agree with everything he says. But, but one thing he said one time that got my attention, he says, he's a psychologist. He's been sitting with people in an office for years like I have. He said, I have 20,000 hours of sitting with people. When they come at me, I know it has nothing to do with what they're presenting.
Right.
It's something unresolved that's within them, and I can see that. So I don't have to react to it. I know what's happening.
Right.
So then, Kelly, I realized I got twice as many hours as he does. I got like 40,000 sitting with people. I know what's going on with them. I don't have to apologize for knowing that anymore,
Right.
Nor do I have to react to it. It's like, okay, thank you. And there's many ways to block and mute and move on.
Yep. That's I do a lot of that. Yeah. Some of them are quite creative, though, and I kind of file those things away in the back of my head for future reference. But yeah.
Well, I still have it going on in different areas, but I think it's a little bit of a paranormal. Maybe it's slightly paranormal. Maybe we're talking about your world, this intuitive world, this other world, the algorithm, which is this mystery in social media that we're trying to figure out, right? What's the algorithm so we can get more whatever?
Whatever, right.
But I think it's true in the world too, just in nature. There's an algorithm of nature, right? And if we can get into the rhythm of it, and nobody is ever going to understand it. Maybe intuitives like you have a better shot at it. I don't know how intuitive I am. I'm a really good facilitator, but I don't notice things like the trees. The trees aren't talking to me. Like the trees talk to my daughter. She can like have conversations with nature. But so yeah, that it's a world that we're in that has a rhythm to it, and the more we can like understand the rhythm, the algorithm, and not engage with it, right? If I try to straighten out these, well, I was going to make a reference, but I won't. There's certain people in the world that I have a certain framework about how the world is. And if I'm going to argue with them, I am telling the algorithm that I want to argue with them. Right. And they'll send me more of them. Right. We do create our own reality, and that's very, very true. I think a part of
my paranormal people world is they're trying to be so out there, so in your face, that they are calling in, prove me wrong, argue with me, fight with me. And, I don't get a lot of backlash on the paranormal side. I get it on the healing trauma side, which is really interesting to me. It's like, have a conversation. Don't just attack. But I find that
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
Well, I want to talk more about that. Let's stay connected and make sure that we support each other, because your work is really important, and you're going to get a different crowd than I get.
Yeah,
We're
that's true.
all inviting a world that is hurting deeply into this healing work, and the world needs it, man. We're putting a few drops of health in
Yep.
an ocean of I call it the shit show ocean. I'm not going to fix the ocean, but I can put some healthier water in there just by doing my own work and maybe sharing it with those that are ready. On the paranormal topic, I don't get to talk to people that are experts in that world very often. And I used to listen to Art Bell and then George
Mhm.
Norris. There is here's the doorway for me in this conversation around that. And that is the difference between some of these people that we're talking about, and George Norrie particularly. George Norrie never argues.
No. Mm-mm.
And your listeners may not know who he is, but it's that you can say more about who he is in a minute. But for the most part, he listens to this outlandish shit that I don't care who you are. It's crazy. But he can find a little element of truth in there and validate the person
Right.
for coming on the show. And he never uh, criticizes.
No.
And that's the work. Thank you for sharing. And there's no argument. Why argue? His algorithm is probably really clean. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, when I was younger, I never missed Art Bell. And I've kind of found George Norrie to be along that same vein. But if you've ever listened, and this is for listeners, Coast to Coast AM, look up George Norrie. He's really an interesting interviewer. I have seen his show on Gaia, and he'll be sitting and he'll, well, that's interesting. And by watching that his mind is going, oh my God, oh my God. But he does fine. He does validate his guests, which I think everyone needs to be validated on some level, if only for their very creative imagination. They do need to be validated. So that's what he brings to the table. I appreciate it, because I watch other interview shows with kind of, it was interesting how he did that. And that to me makes me a little bit better with my show, because I do watch a lot of other people interviewing. And I have had some people on some of my shows that I have seen a year later on his show, and I'm like, whoa, people are buying it. Okay, good. Cool. Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
But
Well,
talk about the creativity aspect. You've literally written a book on creativity aspects of this. How does that come into healing, the creativity aspect?
well, okay. So I've come to reinterpret what Carl Jung, Dr. Jung, said about libido, right? In our culture, we think libido is sexual
Right.
energy, right? And that's part of it. But there's a whole energy within our whole body that's about sexuality, spirituality, and creativity. In some ways, they're the same thing.
Right.
Our healthy libido, our life force energy, is what we're trying to access, right?
Right.
And what gets in the way of that? Couple of things. The biggest thing, trauma. And if maybe your listeners don't like the word trauma, or maybe say, I don't like it all the time. I'm sick of hearing it, actually.
Right.
It's my main thing, and I'm sick of hearing it. So there's a trauma, we could call it conditioning. Sometimes that works better for me. Just the ways that we've been conditioned away from our authentic selves.
Right.
or the Ruizes call it domestication, or we could call it indoctrination. I don't care what word you call it, but most of us have been taken off of our true expression of ourselves, either through severe something severe that's happened when we were little or later in life, or something sometimes even worse, which is more subtle, that people don't think they have trauma because it was just sort of shit show relationships in their family of origin, but they say, no, I'm from a good family, so I'm good. And they ride that thing throughout a life and only live a half life, right? So there's that. Many of us who have some of that have also found ways to medicate the pain, right? There's so many different ways, which is alcohol, drugs, work, sex, love, codependency, gambling, food. That's the one I'm working on right now. We find many ways to medicate the pain, self-medicate, right? So then we've got this double whammy of superficiality. We're wounded and in denial, and we're medicating it all. So this creative force in us is completely blocked.
Right.
We haven't picked up a crayon since we were 4 years old, right? And actually, I've led a bunch of creativity workshops. A lot of tears come when you bring out the paint.
Crayons does it for my
crayons, when you bring out the clay, when you bring out anything that little kids play, because we most of us stuff that little kid in a box and have left him there forever. So it's almost always when people start recovery, whether it's from substance use or any of those other long lists that I just described, or they start their trauma healing process, almost always they're starting writing poetry or they're making little drawings, or they're hearing, wait a minute, I could take an improv class. And I got a client right now. I mean, she's beautiful as a human being, but very hesitant about everything. And man, she just told me she's had her first improv class. I said, wow, that's like the other end of the spectrum, because I've taught these creativity classes, and there's two things people are the most afraid of. One is singing in public, and the other one is trying to do improv. Trying to be funny in front of people, because we have all these fears. And it's actually great therapy. It'll put therapists out of business, improv classes.
Yes, it will. It's really.
So, that's my long answer to about the creative factor.
I think more therapists are starting to see value in theater arts, improv, whatever it is. A friend of mine that used to be a client, and she's gone off on a comedian tour now. She's discovered through all her trauma, she can make it funny.
Oh yeah, man.
Have a slant on it that's funny. And she's literally on tour right now as a comedian. And I would have never expected it from her.
Who in our culture can get away with actually telling the truth?
Right. Comedians. Yeah.
Right. George Carlin, Chappelle, Bill Burr, on and on. My new favorite is Theo Vaughn. Have you run into that guy yet?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Oh man.
It's important though to learn to laugh at some of these things. People think healing has to be serious. I've heard that over and over again. Well, I'm healing. It has to be serious. No, it doesn't have to be serious. Laughter raises your vibration. It helps you heal.
There's many different ways to respond to that, but the angle I'm responding to it now is this idea in the social media world. We want to stop the scroll, right? Have you heard that one? Like, here I am on my phone, just scrolling. What is that? Oh, right. We want to get them to stop the scroll and look at what you're sharing. And in our case, we're trying to heal the world, aren't we? So there's more than just trying to sell some of our stuff. Actually, I have a little people can pay a little bit more and get my videos and stuff because it's going to take them deeper into this work.
Right.
Plus, it's fun for me, and I'm trying to not go broke doing stuff.
That would be
But
the idea. Yes.
there's a thing about comedy or saying something that is just a little like, whoa, catchy, right?
Mhm.
And it's fun. That to me is, I'm a theater guy and a bit of a shadow comedian, I guess, or it's one of, like, if you were to make a list of the fantasy jobs that you could have, I think mine is CIA agent or something like that's ridiculous. Or and then not too far down as a stand-up comedian. So, bringing something that stops the scroll of people who are just unconsciously rolling through life. If you can bring them into the work in an attractive way, we want to be attractive. And to some people, having a little bit of humor is attractive, and it's tricky with this deep healing work, right? To be that. I've gotten, well, actually, I keep expecting be sent to the principal's office for my wise ass framing of some of this, but I haven't yet.
Yeah, I think that is the most shocking thing that some of my clients have realized is no one's going to tell you not to make fun of it. It's your childhood. It's your trauma. Make fun of it. It's healing. I've worked with some clients that are very, very intuitive. And when you are an intuitive and an empath and you've got all this trauma going on, it's just you're beating yourself up for beating yourself up. That's one of the things, that's one of the biggest tools that I've found effective is make them laugh.
Yeah, I have a men's group that we just did last night. We cry together. It's all on Zoom, but these guys have all been through the Deep Waters experience, which I have two things going on, a nonprofit called the Deep Waters Recovery. And on the BobBeare.com side is all this other stuff. But the Deep Waters experience is a 3-day intensive trauma healing workshop. And the men often go into the men's group after, the women go into the women's group or the mixed group. I have all three of those going on now. But last night in this group, there's two men that were just healing deeply and wailing, letting that pain out. And by the end of the group, we were all just belly laughing, crying from laughing. So, because grief and joy are the same river, by the way. I found that out, that if I can get down into that grief and offload it, I've just tapped my deepest joy. Also, It's the same. You get me talking about the daughter that I lost back in the late 80s, and my daughter now, who's a superstar in college. You got me in my grief joy river.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about?
Exactly. Yeah. It's.
And if we block one more thing, if we block one, we block the other.
Yes.
That's the other.
Yes. Sometimes what I have found is people like I lost 5 people in my life in one 6-month period. And, going through that and talking about grieving, the grieving process. And, you think, and I have somehow these people find me. I don't know where they find me, but I will have calls from, I've lost 3 people in the last 4 months. And I'm like, I'm there for you because it really sometimes takes someone who's been there, who can tell you, okay, when you start feeling like this, some of this, but that grief process, especially, in your case where you've lost a daughter and now you have a daughter, there's got to be some stuff that you went through just to get through that. When your daughter was born, I hear this all the time. And I have one client right now. She says, I'm holding my infant son and I cannot stop remembering the daughter I lost. What is wrong with me? Nothing is wrong with you. So how do you not beat yourself up as a parent in that situation? And you don't have to talk about this if it's too uncomfortable, but that was a conversation I had with this client literally yesterday. So it's.
Somebody asked me yesterday, how do you deal with the loss of a relationship, right? I think it's the same with death.
Mhm.
What tool did you use? And I just wrote back with one word: time.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a lot of it. Is
And if you want to reduce the time of horror, the horror period, that you can add one more word, which is support. And if you want to reduce it even more, specific support for whatever you're going through. In other words, a grief group with somebody else in that group that's lost a kid.
right.
I just felt it right there.
Yeah.
Right there. And nobody knows what it's like for you. All of your losses, I could say, yeah, I've been there too. Bullshit. I've not been there. Only
right.
you've been there. And that's a big distinction. And the best I can do is share my experience,
Right.
strength, and hope. One last thing on that, for me, is this is not just about grief and loss. This is about any healing process. It requires being in a somewhat of a specific group where people actually have been through what you are trying to heal from. This was discovered in 1935 by a guy by the name of Bill Wilson and another guy, Dr. Bob. They came up with this little organization called Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yep.
Because for the previous several thousand years, the only tool they had was a bat. They hit somebody over the head or try to bleed them.
Right.
And what they found out is the thing that works the very best is one alcoholic to another.
Yes.
There's no therapist, there's no clinical, there's no program. One alcoholic to another is the thing that works. And it works the same in trauma work. Yeah. If you get a group of people that are talking about their trauma, that is my best chance to heal from my trauma.
Right. Absolutely. You know, sometimes people like this client I was talking about, we tend to beat ourselves up for not being farther along. I see that with almost every person I work with. Well, I should be. No.
Yeah.
You know, you got to let that
What's
go.
that? You know, the Kubler-Ross model for grief work, right, is very specific. Here's the stages of grief. But even she was like pretty clear that that's not exactly how it is.
Right.
It's different for everybody. I wrote a thing last week that was how to grieve in your own time, in your own way. That's how. Yeah. And for me, for the first few years, I was hurting so much. She was just my daughter was still with me through those years. A little less these days. Can't quite make contact with her, but as a young therapist, seriously, I used to, you'll relate to this. I used to have her in the room with me when I didn't know what to do with a client, because when I was a young therapist, I thought I was supposed to have it all figured out. Right. Now I figured out I don't have anything figured out, and that's the best tool for a therapist to come forward with is, wait a minute, I don't know. Let me see what's true for me. But I had her on my shoulder, right here, over my right. She was, okay, sweetie, what do I do? And she always knew.
Yep. Yeah.
It's like an intuitive sort of thing, isn't it?
It is. And I think one of the things that people need to realize is we need to be more open to death is just the next chapter. They're not gone. They're still around. We can still talk to them. And sometimes with grief, that helps people. You know, I could do an entire show on just weird things that have happened to people who have lost people. But it's true. If you want them to be there, if you need them there, you can feel them. And, you know, a lot of therapists don't do that. They poo-poo that completely. And
well, yeah, you have to have been through that. And I've been through it a lot. I've done a lot of grief work about my daughter. I've had my daughter in my arms and talked to her several times in a psychodrama process. And I'm feeling it right now.
Yeah.
So I miss you, sweetie. That kind of a thing. And because we have to get out of ourselves.
Yes.
We just keep it inside spinning around. We're not going to heal. Right. We have to. I've even had somebody play my daughter on the stage and just weep and weep. We have a process at the Deep Waters Experience where many people have lost people, but didn't get to say what they wanted to say. And man, if you can set up a situation and just bring them back to life for a few minutes and a psychodrama, oh man,
Yeah,
that is some powerful
yeah.
transformational healing work, but it's also the best theater in town.
Yeah, I do that with intuitive readings. A lot of times I will bring back, if it was a sudden death, you had no time to say anything, you can then talk to them. And I find that's very helpful for people to
Yes,
do.
yes, it's
But
very,
I,
especially if you have a good container and help them in and then help them out in a good way. I mean, there's ways to do it well, and there's ways to do it poorly.
right. Yes. Yeah. We're about out of time and I am really shocked that my lights are still on. So
Yeah, you're out there in the beautiful wilderness, relying on the electrical grid or your own electrical grid,
yeah,
right?
yep. So it's an experiment. It was not a place I ever thought I would end up, but after being here, I realized this is where I needed to heal and do the rest of my healing work. So now I'm just about ready to rejoin civilization. But thank you so much for your time. We're going to have to do another show and kind of expand on some of this, but it has really been a pleasure having you on the show.
Likewise, Kelly. Let's stay connected and
Yes,
to all the folks that are on this path. Let's keep bringing the work forward. I'm speaking to you, but I'm also speaking to the people
yep,
that are listening to this. This world needs this message
yes,
of healing. I mean, that's the only thing we can do. We're not gonna fix them.
no,
All we can do is bring a healthier person to the world.
right.
So
Yep.
thanks for this. Thanks for this conversation.
Well, thank you very much. And I will talk to you again soon, I am certain.
Take care.